So, bonsoir tout le monde. Bonsoir. Good evening, everyone. And I'm Fin Donnelly, your member of Parliament, and just got back from Ottawa last night, and there was it was quite a delay in getting back to the snow and whatnot. But I was in the office today with a full day of meetings, and so I wanted to cover what's going on in the House, what's going on in terms of some of the recent changes, what's coming up. Just mention a little bit about my critic roles so you have an idea. They've expanded this year. And talk about one campaign that I've been working on for a year, and then really just answer questions. So hopefully I'll cover some ground, and then if there's some things that I didn't cover, please feel free to raise those issues as well. We started off the year with a National Caucus retreat, and we were in Ottawa this year. So that was in January, late January. And the focus that came out of our caucus retreat was we were going to focus on three things: ethics, the economy, and the environment. So those are the three main things that we're going to be looking at taking on the government as official opposition, Canada's official opposition, and really focusing on those three things. So essentially it's ethical scandals, what is our vision of the economy, and what are some environmental concerns that we see happening. There's obviously big energy projects being proposed, and that will have an impact on our environment. In terms of what's going on in the House, there's definitely been activity since we've been back in the end of January. But I will say it's going to, I think, be a pretty slow legislative agenda, because the Conservatives have rammed through a huge amount of legislation in the last year through two omnibus budget bills. So it was C-45 of late and C-38 before that. Massive changes through these two bills. And so now it's essentially there's not a lot of activity going on. However, there is a real focus on the upcoming budget. But that doesn't mean that there hasn't been a number of things going on. There has been activity. So I just cover some of the things that might be of interest to members. And we have some opposition day motions that we put forward. So we just recently had one on Aboriginal support, and our critic Jean Crowder brought that one forward. Of course that failed, the government didn't pass that. This comes on the heels of the Idle No More campaign, and some of the pushback on C-45 that First Nations have been drawing attention to, that got a lot of the attention in the media, national media. So that was our response to essentially those issues that were being raised by that Idle No More campaign. We just recently put forward an opposition day motion, which is focusing on the parliamentary budget officer. His term is coming to an end at the end of this fiscal year, so the end of March. We think he's been doing a great job. We think he's also been very frustrated by this government, and the government has been uncooperative in terms of providing information to allow the PBO, Kevin Page, to do his job. So we brought forward a motion to allow the PBO to extend his mandate until at least a successor is found. So that motion, surprisingly enough, did receive unanimous support. That was passed. We now have one coming forward on EI changes. So employment insurance has been under attack, and that's another one that I was going to focus on, that we have in the House been very active on, certainly in question period, pressing the government on the changes that they've made to employment insurance. They're having I will say, an effect across the country, but felt the most in places like Atlantic Canada. but certainly in other areas. But it seems like the Conservative government doesn't care. They have an agenda, just like dismantling our Coast Guard stations on both coasts and consolidating some of the MCTS, or the Marine Communication Traffic Service Centers. They don't care. They are going forward on their cost-effective agenda of consolidation and reduction in cuts. So we've been pushing back on employment insurance. There's also been quite a bit of focus by the official opposition on ethical scandals that the Conservatives are finding themselves embroiled in, whether it's robocalls in Saskatchewan to do with the redistribution, or if it's the Senate, which we've had a couple of lately, Mike Duffy and his whole scandal over our residency, and Patrick Brazier, one of the senators who's been charged with domestic violence and I believe sexual assault. So he's been removed from the Conservative caucus, but he is still receiving pay as a senator. So he hasn't received his sentence or been proven guilty yet. So we'll see. But this has allowed us to raise the issue of the unelected and unaccountable Senate, and the need to what we've been calling for, abolish the Senate and get rid of the Senate. So that's been quite in the forefront, not only in QP, but also in the national media. I should mention the Unity Act that we proposed. It's come on the heels of the Clarity Act, and this is a private member's bill. And we were forced to take a position, and all parties were, because the bloc, there's 4 members. They're independent members because they don't have enough to actually form an official party, because they have lost all their numbers, and so now they're not able to be an official party. But it was a bloc member who brought forward a private member's bill, and essentially challenging the Clarity Act. So we reacted in terms of bringing forward what we're calling the Unity Act, which is providing if there was to be a referendum in Quebec, we have said it must be a clear question. We've provided details on that, and we've said 50% plus 1 is what's needed. Now this has definitely caused some discussion in our caucus, but we have come out united behind this move. We also agreed with the timing of this bill, because it's 2 years before the election. So far it's come out quite well. The national media has been very impressed with the way Tom Mulcair, our leader, has presented this. However, our leader in this province and our party has come out with a differing view, a different take. He wants a higher threshold in terms of what it would take to separate from the country. So that's caused definitely some concern, and certainly as Adrian is trying to do no harm moving into the provincial election, this is one of those where it's caused a bit of friction, because Vaughn Palmer did an interview with him right away, and that was one of the things that he was asked about. So, and I'll mention later in my report how I'm actually playing a role now between the federal caucus and our provincial caucus. But what we're going forward is we want to just leave that one alone, let it work itself out. We've had in my office 2 emails about it, and I checked in with other BC MPs and NDP MPs, and they've had 1 or 2 issues over it as well. So very little in the way of any kind of concern or reaction to it. You want to take over my report?
Little distraction there.
Don't share a stage, dogs, and children.
stare down now. So I'm going to keep going. So I want to talk about a few changes and upcoming issues. One, of course, is the redistribution report was tabled in the House when we came, the first day we came back, January 28th. So that is going to have a significant impact on our riding and this area, the Tri-Cities, New Westminster and Burnaby. The big changes are for Coquitlam New West. The take-home message is that essentially the Commission did not listen to our public delegation or the public. And that was certainly my reaction in terms of when the media followed me and asked, what's your comment on that? So no decisions have been made in terms officially, because now what happens is this report with their unofficial lines or new boundaries goes forward. It goes to a committee in Parliament. It's called PROC, and it's set up to hear from members of Parliament and what any concerns they have. So as a BC caucus, we're working through what is going to be our strategy in reacting to the proposals, because you can't just look at it in isolation. As you know, if you look at one riding, there's a domino effect. It affects all other ridings as well. So we have to be coordinated in our criticism or our strategy to deal with the redistribution. But essentially, for those that don't know the changes, what's happened is New West has been consolidated into one riding with Burnaby, with North Burnaby. That means Coquitlam has been split into two. So there's a portion of Coquitlam, Maillardville, which goes in and joins all of Port Moody and Morne-Belcara into one riding, which is now being called Port Moody Coquitlam. And then the other riding includes the lower portion and Westwood Plateau of Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam. So that becomes Port Coquitlam, or Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam. So the numbers on those obviously fluctuate for NDP and Conservatives when you do the number crunching. So for this riding, this Port Moody Coquitlam riding, it goes from a very positive situation, or not a very positive, but a slightly positive, perhaps a +3, to a -6. So this is going to be a very tough battle for whoever ends up representing this riding. Again, we're going to wait to see, because it's still got to go through the committee process. There may be some changes, it's hard to say. And then it will be approved by Parliament sometime probably in June or before the session ends, and then we'll know. Then at that point we will certainly need to decide which areas we're going after. So which area Peter Julian will represent, which area I will represent, which area Kennedy Stewart will represent in the Burnaby Tri-City, New Westminster area. So no official decisions have been made yet, but there are some fairly likely scenarios. So that is the New West riding goes to a very positive situation. That'll be a very good riding for us. There is a new riding being proposed in Burnaby South. That is a very positive situation for us in NDP. The Burnaby North Seymour, the new Burnaby North Seymour, which is essentially what Kennedy's riding is plus North Shore, or a portion of North Shore, goes to a very difficult situation for us in terms of winnable riding. It goes to a -9. So that is a very tough riding, and it's also a geographically challenging riding because it goes across the North Shore, to the North Shore. So there's some real challenges for us, and we need to be aware of those. Again, nothing is official, nothing is set, but we need to be aware of what's coming down. Once things are official, then of course we will have to make decisions and be aware of our game plan and
have a goal. We'd like to increase our seats in the next federal election, certainly in British Columbia. So we're working with that in mind. So that's sort of I'd be happy if there's more questions on redistribution, but that's a little bit about some of that. Obviously, there's a provincial election coming up, so that's going to be very important that we be involved with that election. I think we've got some good candidates in the local area. Selena Robinson, City Councillor, is going to be the candidate in Coquitlam-Mayardville. And Diane Thorne is retiring, stepping down after a long history in politics. In New Westminster, Don Black is also retiring, and we have Judy Darcy, who's the elected candidate there, and she's going to be fighting the battle for the NDP. And then in Port Moody Coquitlam, we have Joe Trazzolini, who is now the NLA, and he will also be seeking re-election. And then we have a big battle in Coquitlam-Burke going on, Burke Mountain. So there's a contested nomination with 4 candidates. That's coming up. The nomination is coming up March 3rd, Sunday, March 3rd at Nestor Elementary. So for those, we should be keeping an eye on who's going to take that one. But essentially, once that happens, and Mike Farnworth, of course, in Port Coquitlam will also be going for re-election. So working on those provincial campaigns will also be very important. The following year, next year, 2014, we will have local elections, so the civic elections will be back on, and certainly need to be working with those that are interested in seeking re-election and election in New Westminster, Coquitlam, and Port Moody as well. So along with the convention that's happening in Montreal in mid-April, there's also the Liberal leadership. The national Liberal leadership is happening. So the timing is unfortunate in that it's the exact same weekend. Our convention is going forward with the Liberal leadership that's happening on Sunday. However, it is what it is, and we planned a long time ago for this convention, and so the Liberals have chosen that. However, it's going to be, it will be interesting to see who they choose, and it'll be interesting to see how Canadians react to the new leader, because how the Liberals do is going to be very important in terms of taking Harper head on in the next federal election. So I think there's 9 candidates vying for seeking the leadership. So that will be interesting and something to watch. In terms of critic roles, I just want to mention, I think many people may be aware that my critic role is Western Economic Diversification. I am the critic for WED. I'm also the deputy critic for Fisheries and Oceans Canada, so the West Coast critic. We have increased. When I was the national fisheries critic, I was doing it on my own. We've now added 3 people, so I'm West Coast critic. We have Phil Toon from Quebec, who's the East Coast critic, and then we have Robert Chisholm from Nova Scotia, who's the national critic. So the 3 of us work together on fisheries and oceans issues. I just founded the Oceans Caucus. It's an all-party Oceans Caucus, and so I founded that one late last year. Something I'm very excited about. There's a lot of focus on fisheries, but there isn't as much attention on oceans. So in order to create a forum for dialogue and discussion and focus on things like ocean acidification, which is kind of the equivalent of climate change in the atmosphere. The changing climate is also having a huge impact on our oceans. It's acidifying our oceans and changing the nature of our oceans. So this will be a forum to discuss the ocean, critical issues, as well as potential opportunities that our oceans provide us. And on the west and east coast, we have amazing institutions that are doing great work in ocean technology that could be exported around the world. So I'm quite, we've already had one caucus meeting, and and we had an excellent speaker. And then I'm looking forward to organizing more meetings on that. And finally, in terms of roles, I'm the caucus chair, the BC caucus chair now. So what that means is I'm chairing meetings of my BC caucus colleagues. So there's 12 of us in British Columbia. And so we meet before the National Caucus meeting every Wednesday when the House is in session. And we meet, our BC caucus meets for an hour before. So I chair those meetings. I become the spokesperson for the caucus and caucus issues. Now, I mentioned for instance, the Unity Act and that issue with Tom having one message and Adrian a slightly different take. So I become the person that's the go-to person to try and help negotiate and communicate between the federal and provincial. So that will become more of a profile role that I'll play in those sort of negotiations. So it's, I think it's an exciting role for me to play that role. One of the focuses that I'd like to do is increase communication between the federal caucus and the leader's office, the OLO, and our provincial, our BC caucus, as well as our the provincial NDP. So that's critical roles. Finally, I want to mention, leave off with, I had 7 private members' bills. I was number 75, I think that was my number. So that means your number comes up after, well, it's been 2 years. So I finally got an opportunity to go forward with one. I could choose one of my private members' bills or one of my motions, or I could choose something completely new. I decided to choose to move forward with my shark fin bill, and I've had a campaign going for over a year, and I feel very good about the possibility of that passing. And so what happens is now it goes forward to what's called second reading. The first hour of debate is on Monday, so at 11 a.m. I'll be in the House. I have 15 minutes to start off that first hour of debate, and there'll be 5 minutes of questions and answers from other members. And then there will be other members, 5 other members speaking to fill up that hour. They can present 10 minutes, and there's no questions and answers on that. So that's the first hour of debate. Then in mid-March will be the second hour of debate. That will close off debate for second reading, and then it goes to a vote around March 27th. So March 22nd is second hour of debate. March 27th it goes to the House for a vote. Of course, if we have all opposition supporting my bill, it still won't be enough. I need some conservative members, so I need government members to support it. I've been lobbying and specifically targeting 45 conservatives, and I've been getting a fair amount of support. So over this next month, I'm going to be going back to those. We've been keeping a grid, a table of what they've said to us, and I've got a number of yeses. I've got a number of people that are leaning in that direction, and we also know where the opposition is. We also know now what their caucus is saying about my bill, so I've got to try and counter some of their arguments as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they say, what speaker they put up in the House on Monday, and what they say, because they could put, for instance, Alice Wong up, or they could put Randy Kemp, the parliamentary secretary, or they could put someone else, or they could not put a speaker up at all. So there's many different options. So there's some that are very opposed to the bill, and there are quite a few that are sympathetic and understanding and want to address the issue of shark conservation. So just in a nutshell, up to 73 million sharks a year are being killed. They're targeted for their fins. The fins are worth $200 to $400 a pound. So up to $400 a kilogram for a shark fin. And that is causing essentially the demise of sharks. So by 2017, some scientists estimate we could have a dramatic reduction and drive some sharks into extinction. These predate dinosaurs. Sharks have been around for a long time. They're apex predators, so they are top predators in the food chain, and they maintain that ecosystem health in our ocean. So they play a key role. So they're symbolic of how we need to address ocean issues, and certainly big predators like sharks, which play a fundamental role, important role, need to be protected. I think if we can turn this around and turn it into like some of the whale stories, we have whales are a good news story. They were threatened years ago, and many have made a comeback. Some are still threatened, like our killer whales off the west coast, certainly our resident orca whales. But in general, our whale population is rebounding. Ideally, and this is where human intervention can play a role, is we can turn this around. So hopefully, and there's a worldwide movement to protect sharks, even including China, where there's a strong presence to try and get shark fin soup off many menus. Like the government of China has taken shark fin soup off their public banquet menu, and they're phasing it out over the next year or so. So, and many hotels have done that. Floda, one of the largest Chinese restaurants in Canada, which is in Vancouver, has taken shark fin off the menu. There's many municipalities, including Port Moody, that has banned shark fin from their municipalities. And so we want to go forward with a national importation ban to ban the importation of shark fins into Canada. So I'm hopeful that that will happen. It's quite exciting to be able to be debating that in the House next week, and then next month we'll be going to a vote. If it passes, then it moves forward to the Fisheries and Oceans Committee, and that's where it'll receive some discussion at committee, and it could get amended at committee. But once it gets through committee, it comes back to the House. It has to come back within 60 days, and then it's put back for third reading vote. And if it passes third reading, essentially it will become a law, and that would be pretty exciting. But then it would just go through the upper house, the Senate, and then it would receive royal assent, and then become. Then it would require an OIC, an ordering council. In other words, the law must take effect. So there's still months and months to go before this would actually become a law, but it's exciting. It's actually happening. Not many MPs have this opportunity, so